Is there a regulation governing PPE in South Africa?
No, I think that's the short answer. I think if you just know the basic guidelines of knowing what compliance looks like, you can then clearly see what's compliant and what's non-compliant. We often go to customers and we say, declaration of conformity, and they look at us with big eyes going, what are you talking about? What they do now is there's a product and then they give them a data sheet. And they say, now the product complies because on their data sheet it states we conform to.
Hello and welcome to My Safety Hub, your go-to source for all things health and safety. We are still here at the Saiosh Conference 2025 and I'm joined here today with Christo Nel, the Managing Director of uvex Safety South Africa. Christo, a brilliant presentation on exposing the truth in PPE compliance. It was a real eye-opener for me. So out the gate, I want to ask you a very blunt question. Is there a regulation governing PPE in South Africa?
No, I think that's the short answer. Because when we speak about a regulation, it's a legal framework that dictates compliance and what it should look like. So that's what they did in Europe. So firstly, they had a directive, which was guidelines for PPE compliance and standards and etc. And because it wasn't working, because they were still getting non-compliant products into the market, they decided they've got to up it, they've got to make it more serious, and then they said, okay, we're going to turn it into a regulation. Now, a regulation is a legal requirement.
Of course.
So in South Africa where we are, so obviously you've got the OSH Act, there it states compliance, but then you go to the kind of, if you look at the likes of SABS, okay, so SABS will say, here's a standard, and what they've done is they've basically adopted the EN standards as their own. Okay, so let's take eyewear as an example. They say, okay, well, SABS will have a standard. So SANS is SABS, you get SABS, and when they issue a standard, it's SANS. SANS 50166.
Okay.
That's the SANS eyewear standard. And pretty much what it says in the standard is that we are following the EN 166 standard.
Okay.
That's why it's 50166. So within that, it basically states if you comply to EN, to the EN 166 standard, you comply to SANS 166.
Okay.
Because they're not testing.
Okay.
So there's no facility locally to then test a product and make sure it complies. So all they're saying is you've got to produce a valid CE certificate that then basically underlines your conformity to CE, which then is the SAN standard as well. Then you get product lines like respiratory, which is tested locally.
Okay.
Now, then you get 50149, which is then that standard. And the EN 149 standard is the European standard. So what they then do is they do test locally, but they test according to the EN standard. So there's a bit of a grey area because they're still testing according to the old standard. And that's where the European bodies are saying, well, then you can't really put EN on there because it's not the latest standard. But that's what SANS is basically saying. So there's still a lot of grey area when it comes to that. And but I think from our point of view is within the grey area, if you want to put EN or CE on any product, it's very clear from all the authorities that you've got to comply 100%.
Yes.
So there's no regulatory framework in South Africa that covers it. We don't have a lot of regulation in the market. You don't really have people checking it out, you know, compared to the likes of Europe, where they are very strict with products coming into the market and then circulating and managing what's going on the ground, which we don't really have in South Africa yet. So still a lot of work to be done. But getting there.
Okay, and I think the fact of the matter is there are industry-specific manufacturer standards that we need to comply with. Whether that be national or international, there is a set rule of how things need to be produced, distributed, and so forth, right?
Correct.
So with that being said, there is then naturally compliant and non-compliant PPE products, as you've now made mention. So what are some of the misconceptions about PPE compliance that you've encountered in your experience?
I think one thing I mentioned in my presentation now was a lot of people fall back on we comply to Europe, but this is South Africa, so we don't have to comply 100%.
Yes.
Whereas, again, the EN authorities will state, listen, if you want to put EN or CE on it, you've got to comply 100%. Whereas in South Africa, we go, okay, well, only parts of it. We don't need to comply to the full standard. We don't need to do every single thing to comply to the regulation. We can just, for example, produce a test report that then states I comply to that standard. There's also several things going on in terms of claiming CE, where in fact it's the incorrect CE mark and it's the previous EN standard. So if you claim previous EN standard, by now with the regulation, the whole grey area, the kind of grace period has fallen away. So every single product at the moment needs to comply to the new standard. So I think there's a lack of awareness in terms of what that looks like currently in South Africa.
Definitely, that lack of awareness you spoke about is astronomical, and I think the information you're relaying now is invaluable for the public and employers out there. So how would you advise organizations to identify and manage those risks associated with non-compliant versus compliant PPE? And again, how does the declaration of conformity come into play here?
Okay, so I think if you just know the basic guidelines of knowing what compliance looks like, you can then clearly see what's compliant and what's non-compliant. And but that's where the lack of awareness comes in as well. You know, so we often go to customers and we say declaration of conformity, and they look at us with big eyes going, "What are you talking about?" So because what they do now is there's a product, and then they give them a data sheet. And they said, now the product complies because on that data sheet it states we conform to, say, EN 388. But that data sheet is issued by the same company that gives you the product. So anyone can do a data
biased,
sheet. And, you know, it's a Microsoft Word document that I technically just update, and then I put my label on PDF format. There's my data sheet. It means nothing. Whereas a declaration of conformity is a legal document, again. So it states, for example, uvex, this address, has manufactured this product at this address. So you can trace it straight through back to the factory. But it needs third-party verification. So then it states there's a EN certified laboratory. Here's the details, here's the address, here's the name, here's everything. And they issued this certificate number, and then it gives the certificate number on the declaration of conformity as well. And then uvex have got to sign it. And that person that signs the document is legally liable if he's lying on their document. So in Europe, they can go to jail if they get it wrong. So that means that on that one page, which is public domain, this is what other people are also saying, well, we don't need to, it's not. So the regulation states it's public domain, it should be on your website. So you go to uvex, you find, here's the product, there's a data sheet, and there's the declaration of conformity, because that is public domain. And on there you can find everything and you can trace it.
So basically then, without a declaration of conformity, it's like being a heart surgeon but not being able to prove it.
100%. You know, I can prove it by writing on a piece of paper, put my logo on, and there you go. And that's pretty much what a data sheet is. It's nothing more than that.
So that is extremely important. That conformity is a huge thing then, in my opinion. So moving then to the regulatory bodies that we spoke about now, what role do you think those regulatory bodies and industry associations can play in promoting PPE compliance? And are there specific initiatives that you think they can take, or something that you would like to see from these industry bodies and associations?
I think, you know, there's not enough in South Africa though. So if you look at, I honestly believe SABS and SANS can do more. Instead of just issuing, they've got to start regulating
and governing
with the NRCS. Also saying, okay, well, these are our standards, these are our procedures. We need to enforce it more out into the market. Like I said, we often find non-compliant products, and it's key customers, big customers, and they've been using it for years. So then you go, okay, well, how does that even happen? How does non-compliant products get into South Africa, firstly? So you've got to be able to enforce your standards and your framework coming through the borders as well, which is what Europe is doing very, very, very well. And then you get associations like, you know, a Saiosh, which is doing a phenomenal job. And I'm not just saying it because I'm here, but it is the market leader in terms of awareness, because we've got a platform to then now do what I just did now, and you're speaking to the right crowd. We need more and more and more and more of that. And because I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where you've got proper regulation on the ground. So then it's up to us as manufacturers, safety distribution
Yes.
partners, occupational hygienists, safety managers, the Saioshs, and everyone then just speaking from the same or singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah.
To then just create that awareness, because it's falling flat at the moment.
I agree. And it's partners like this and platforms like this where we can set the standard. We can set that example for others.
100%.
Because obviously a non-compliant piece of PPE, as we've now seen throughout the day, can be very costly and impact a person and their families very, very negatively.
Yes.
So then in closing, what advice would you give to organizations out there struggling to prioritize PPE compliance, and what steps can they take to improve that culture?
I think that's a hard one, because you'll have different kind of action plans for different end users. They're all different. They've all got different cultures. They all have different ways of getting things done. And like we heard today as well, safety is not always first.
Yes.
And like Dr. Andrew said this morning, and it's very prevalent, I would say, in the market. I think in terms of a guideline is, make sure you just know what compliance actually
Yes.
looks like. And it's not hard. What I just did now, we can very quickly tell you what compliance looks like. And it's in 1 hour session, done.
Yeah.
So when you train your occupational hygienists or your safety managers or the committees that are making the decisions, they've just got to have a framework to check what compliance actually looks like. And again, it's not an MBA dissertation. It's
Sure.
very actually straightforward. But we find often that procurement's making the decisions, not safety. And then you can't say safety first. It's budget first.
Yes.
It's price over protection. It's not actually safety. And then the awareness starts falling by the wayside, because now something else is driving the decision making.
Yeah.
So I think if you can just start in the right place, knowing that you're not protecting an employee with a employee number, it is a person.
Of
It's
course.
that cosmic compassion that the previous presenter spoke about, and realizing that and I said it now, it's a son or a daughter or someone wearing PPE.
Yes.
So just make the right decisions based on very basic guidelines of what conformity looks like. And we can go onto site and tell you what that looks like, very basically. And then it's not uvex saying it. It is globally what CE and EN stands for. Half an hour Google search will tell you what that looks like.
Exactly.
But, it's actually quite simple.
Yeah.
But we just find people they don't focus on it enough.
Not
and
willing.
Not willing. And unfortunately, we're seeing it with a lot of our competitors as well, or other companies, because you've got
Production.
shortcuts out in the market, and you're trying to tick different boxes, and
Of course.
but we be seeing a lot of companies also making a lot of effort, and end users spending a lot of time in getting that done. So there are flagship end users out there, flagship producers, not just uvex. There are a lot of manufacturers really saying and doing the right things, and you can prove it time and time again. And we just need more of that in our
I
industry.
agree. So getting the right education and background on compliance is prevalent to making sure people return home healthy and safe after work.
100%.
That's the bottom line here.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. It was so insightful. We learned quite a lot about compliance in PPE in South Africa. So for the employers out there, it's really important that they educate themselves and do the right thing.
100%.
Thank you. We really appreciate
Appreciate
your
the time as well.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. David.